Come to a standing position at the top of your mat. And then big inhale, reach your arms up, stretch up, Urdhva Hastasana. Lift your heels, stretch up even higher, come up to your toes if you can. Slowly roll your heels back down to the mat and release your arms back down, standing pose. Reposition your feet if you need. Another big inhale, reach your arms, and then again, lift your heels, stretch your heels up to the ceiling, getting even taller, balancing on your toes. Roll back down to your heels. Exhale, release your arms back down to your sides. Again, if you need to reposition your feet, find your balance, and one more big stretch up. Inhale, and then roll to the toes all the way up. Get those heels even higher. And roll back down to your heels. Release your arms. Samastitihi. Exhale. Inhale, reach your arms. Keep your heels down this time. Stretch over to the right. Grab your left wrist with your right hand and gently pull your left arm over, pressing into your left foot. Inhale back up, and then exhale, release your arms down to your sides. Okay, again, big inhale, reach. Grab your right wrist this time with your left hand and pull gently over, pressing into your right heel. A brief little side stretch here. Inhale back up to stand. Samastitihi. Exhale, standing pose. We're going to take this into a balancing pose, Vrikshasana. You're going to slide your right foot up first for tree pose. I'm going to turn and face you so you can see what's going on here. Take the right foot up. Use your right hand to help. Place your right foot in your inner left thigh, inner left knee area, inner left ankle area. It's all good, wherever you want to put it. Find your balance on your left foot. Squeeze your outer left hip in and reach your arms if it's okay for balance. Keep your gaze steady on the horizon. Avoid over-rotating the right hip. So if you feel your right butt cheek lifting, turn the right knee forward a little bit more. And keep the outer left hip squeezing in. Outer right hip squeezing in. Soften your shoulders. Stretch through your arms, not your shoulders. One more big inhale. And on your exhale, take your hands down. And then release your foot down. Standing pose. Shake it out if you need. And side two as you're ready. Okay, left foot slides up. Place your left foot on your inner left thigh, knee area, or ankle. It is okay to put it on the knee because you're not pressing in with your foot. Your foot is grabbing the inner thigh by pressing the outer right hip in and the outer left hip. So your hips are squeezing in, creating that catch, creating that stick of your foot on the thigh. When you find your balance, you can reach your arms. Think about lifting your shoulder blades up, but dropping the shoulder heads down into the shoulder joints. And then again, keep your gaze level. Another big breath here. And when you're ready, take your arms back down, hands to heart center, and slide your left foot back down. Returning to Tadasana or mountain pose. Samastitihi is the same thing. It means pose of equal balance. So find equal balance in your feet. Reach your arms up. Big inhale, Urdhva. Exhale, fold, Uttanasana. And take a half fold just to start, hands to shins. When you feel like you can fold deeper, you can let your head relax. You can let your shoulders soften down. Pedal out your knees here, bending one and then the other. If you need to work out any kinks in the hips or the hamstrings. When you feel like you could, just let your head hang, let your arms hang, and let your back round out so you feel an even curvature from your tailbone to your neck. Keep the weight of your posture in the balls of your feet. And then if you want to add in an arm stretch, you can take your hands behind your back and interlace your fingers and drop your arms overhead. And again, try not to let the weight of your pose fall back to your heels. It stays in the front ends of your feet, the balls of your feet. All right, release your hands down if you've got the mudra. Hug behind your calves now with your hands, elbows bent. Then bend your knees and place your belly on your thighs, thighs to your belly. So really squeeze in and hug. Okay, take your hands back down to the floor now and step back into downward facing dog, just so you can take your knees to the floor and sit back child's pose. Hips to heels, forehead on the mat, and extend your triceps, or extend your elbows. So use your triceps to extend your elbows. Soften your shoulders though, and release the back of your neck. You can feel your core hugging your ribs into your thighs even more. Take as long as you'd like here. If you want a few more moments here, please rest. And when you're ready, come up into tabletop pose, hands and knees. You would stack your shoulders over your wrists and your hips over your knees. Spread out your fingers evenly and pinch the mat with your index finger and thumb of each hand, and then lift your knees and press up and back, downward facing dog. Same thing as that forward bend. If you need a few movements just to work out any kinks here, you can start to pedal your heels or bend your knees, wave your tail side to side if that feels better. Feel the length in your spine though, the length in your back. And again, your shoulder blades move up as your shoulder heads move down. Finding balance in all four of those connective points to the floor. So your feet and your hands, find the balance between those 4 points, and then start to lower your knees back down to the mat for tabletop pose. And take an inhale, open your chest here, a little cow stretch. And then an exhale, round out, cat stretch. Drop your chin. Feel your belly working to move your spine in these two different ranges of motion, extension and flexion. Inhale, open your chest. Exhale, round your spine, drop your chin, and feel, again, your core, the front of your core working to create those two movements. One more round. Inhale, open your chest. And exhale, round your spine. Tuck your toes here, lift your hips up and back and feel that lift into down dog. Pull your spine out of its flexion from your cat stretch right into down dog. And now feel the length in your low back. There's even more length as your sit bones lift up to the ceiling. Walk your feet up to your hands, back into your forward bend, Uttanasana. With your next inhale, engage your back muscles, press the floor away with your feet, and reach your arms up, Urdhva Hastasana. Samastitihi, exhale, standing pose. And step back to take a wide leg stance. So separate your feet about 4 feet apart. Open your arms as you inhale, reach your arms up, big stretch. Exhale, take your hands to your hips as you start to fold out. And continue the fold down using your belly. Then once you fold all the way down to the floor, hands come down, and take any variation with your hands that you'd like. If you want your hands to reach back and flip your palms up, or if you want to take your hands on the floor like chaturanga arms. Prasarita A is hands on the floor, elbows bent. B is hands on hips, C, hands behind your back, fingers interlaced, and D is grabbing your big toes. And then anything else in between any of those fancy named postures, you can do whatever you want here. It should feel good. So here's B with your, if you're in a position that you can look up and see the video, your hands are on your hips, elbows bent. I like this one just because it engages the core. And then when you come up to stand, your hands are already in place. Inhale up slowly so you don't get lightheaded. And if you do, come back into a half forward bend and bend your knees. Turn your right toes to point out and turn your left toes to turn in once you get back up to a standing position. Triangle, big inhale, stretch your arms apart. And then reverse your triangle first. Press out into your right big toe, lift your right hand up. And then bend your right knee, reverse warrior two. So just stretching out, preparing for your triangle shape. Press back through your left heel and make sure your left side's not overworking or cramping. So lengthen out the left side. Now straighten your right leg and exhale, stretch down to your shin with your right hand. Left hand stretches up to the ceiling, Trikonasana, triangle pose. Just feel your feet pressing the mat away, pressing the floor away, and imagine stretching your mat apart. And then feel your two sides of your hips drawing in, hugging your spine. Now take your left hand behind your back for a half bind, and if you can't quite grab your right thigh with your left fingers, just let your arm rest behind your back. This will help open the shoulder and the armpit, and then lengthen the back of your neck. Now place the bend in your right knee. Your right fingertips can come to the floor. You can take your palm to the floor, or you can take your elbow to your thigh. And when I took my elbow to my thigh, I noticed there was so much more space for rotation. So I'm going to kind of modify that and take my hand to my ankle. That's where I prefer it. And then once you find the right place for your hand, stretch your left arm overhead so you can fully extend this side angle. Keep the right knee bent forward and your left heel pressing back. I'm going to half bind and then start to move into half moon. Right hand comes out farther away from your right foot, just about 6 inches diagonally. Then lift your left foot, and I've got that half bind just to remind my right thigh to rotate open. And for this half moon, I'm just going to keep my gaze down because I'd rather have the posture than the gaze. And the gaze is steady wherever it goes. It doesn't matter where it is. The gaze being steady will help focus your mind. Rebend your right knee and land back on your left foot and back into that side angle just for a brief moment here. The left arm stretches up overhead, big stretch out. With your next exhale, sweep back down to the floor and spin on your right heel so you can reset in your wide leg forward bend. Prasarita Padottanasana. Again, any arm variation that you'd like. And take a few moments here. If you want to stay here longer, you can pause and catch up when you're ready. Push down equally into both of those feet and feel those sit bones lift. Feel your back is just hanging, your head, your torso is just hanging. When you come up to stand, a half lift, exhale, and then the rest of the lift all the way up on your next inhale. We'll set up for triangle on the second side. Turn your left toes to point to the back end of your mat. Angle your right toes in. Big stretch up with your arms. And then we'll reverse the triangle to start. Reach your left hand up and back. Slide your right hand down your right leg. Press forward with your left foot. And then following the line of your left foot pressing forward, start to bend your left knee and reverse your warrior. Stretch your left side without over shortening your right side. So make sure that right side's not cramping up or shortening up too much. Then right into triangle pose. Straighten out the right leg, your left leg, take your left hand down your left shin. Rotate your ribs open. Your belly button is pointing out to the side of the room. And your right hand up to the ceiling, your left hand to your shin, your foot, or the floor. Press back with your right heel. And then in the opposite direction, you're going to stretch your sternum away from the right heel. And then that half bind when you're ready, your right hand can go behind your back and hook your left thigh if it's available. Open that right armpit up to the ceiling. See if you can keep your left ribs long, especially when we move into that side angle next. You can start to bend your left knee towards your left arm. And then notice if your left side just kind of shrinks down or bends. And then take that left hand wherever you can to get your left side to be longer. So I'm going to keep it right on my shin. I like it there on my foot. And then once you get your long angle here, your long lines from your right foot to your right arm, you can stretch your right arm out and create an even bigger, longer line. A nice diagonal line. Half moon is next. Reset your half bind. You can wiggle your right foot forward. Take your left hand out to the diagonal 6-inch line away from your left pinky toe. And then open your top ribs, bottom ribs roll under. Again, keep your gaze down to the floor to keep your mind focused, but to help with balance. Also, sometimes taking your gaze up shortens the neckline, and we want to have a nice long front body. Bend your left knee so you can land back down on your right foot. Set up that side angle one more time, and then stretch your right arm overhead, pressing that long line again, right heel back, right arm overhead. Okay, exhale down to the floor, back into your wide leg forward bend, and just kind of float back into it. Shake it out, move out anything that needs to be stretched. So if your feet are getting tired, you can reposition your feet. Just take a moment or two here, and you're welcome to come back up to stand whenever you're ready, of course. It's your practice. And this is Prasarita D. If you can peek up and see what I'm doing here, I'm grabbing my big toes and bending my elbows apart away from each other. So this is the D version of that wide leg forward bend. And then when you are ready to come up half lift, inhale. Use your exhale to firm up your core and your back, and then inhale all the way back up to stand. Back up to the top of your mat, Samastitihi, standing pose. Take as long here as you need to stretch out your feet. Sometimes the plantar fascia gets a little tight there, a little overworked. Press down into your feet, inhale, reach your arms, and exhale, forward bend, Uttanasana. Take a big step back with your left foot and then lower your left knee down for a low lunge, Anjaneyasana. Your right knee is bent and it can bend over your ankle. It can bend over the top of your foot. You do not need a 90-degree bend here. The right shin can go beyond vertical. Hands come back down to your mat and step back with your right foot into downward facing dog as you exhale. Start to take your knees down to the floor like you're going to take child's pose, but then take your shoulders over your fingertips, chest to the floor, 8-limb bow. So it's toes, knees, chest, chin. And then on your inhale, cobra or up dog. Exhale, come back into downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Step your left foot forward, lower your right knee down. Inhale, sweep your arms up. Anjaneyasana, devotional pose. Really, we're stretching the front of that right hip out. So again, that left knee can bend as deep as you need. And with your next inhale, step up with your right foot into a half fold so that your exhale can fold you into Uttanasana, followed by an inhale sweeping you up, Urdhva Hastasana. Exhale, Samastitihi, standing pose. We'll do that again on the second side. Big inhale, stretch up, Urdhva Hastasana. Exhale, fold, Uttanasana. This time you're going to step your right foot back and lower your right knee down. Bend your left knee forward. Inhale, reach your arms and stretch the front of that right hip out again. With your exhale, hands back on the mat. Step back into downward facing dog with your left foot. And again, we're going to take that 8-point bow. So when you take your knees to the floor, it's knees. Move your shoulders way over your fingertips, bend your elbows like chaturanga, but then only tap your chest and chin. Then push through, point your toes back, open your heart, cobra. Roll back up over your knees, tuck your toes, and press up and back, downward facing dog. Big breath here. Stretch out your back. Power through with your right foot, step your right foot up to your mat, top of your mat. Left knee down, inhale, low lunge. Stretch the front of that left hip out this time. All right, exhale, your hands come down. With your inhale, step your left foot up to the half fold. Exhale into a full forward bend, Uttanasana. Inhale, use your back muscles to lift up all the way up. Reach your arms, Urdhva Hastasana. Samastitihi, standing pose. Exhale. Take just a moment here to find your balance between your feet, the front and the back, side to side. And then when you're ready, big stretch up, inhale. Fold with an exhale, Uttanasana. Step back with your next inhale, come into downward facing dog. Just for a moment, exhale there. Lift your heels if you need, lift your sit bones and just stretch. Really nice big stretch here. And then take your knees back down to the floor. We're going to come into Virasana. So if you have a block, you can sit on a block between your heels, separate your feet apart. So you can sit directly between your two heels. Knees both pointing straight forward and as far together as you can get them without pain. Relax all of your toes, pointing straight back. So just a few moments here to stretch out your thighs. Focus your gaze and focus your breath. And please take longer here if you'd like, but when you're ready, tabletop. So you can lower all the way down to the floor from tabletop. Point your toes back and lift your feet, locust B, with your hands on the floor, just like chaturanga. Shoulders lift as high as your elbows, so don't let your chest drop here. Keep lifting your chest, lift your chin, lift your throat, press those toes back, open your legs as far as you like, and then lower your feet down, and then push into your hands, straighten out your arms, and lift your hips and thighs, up dog. Couple breaths here. Roll back over your knees. Inhale, lift your arms, lift your head, kneeling, upward hand pose. Exhale, hands to heart. Ustrasana is next. Hands to your heels or blocks, or maybe your hands come to your hips. Press your chest up to the ceiling, and your hips can move back behind your knees. Please allow that movement to happen. Don't force your hips forward. Instead, focus on chest lifting, throat lifting, and then on your next inhale, back up. So you're welcome to take longer in these poses as you'd like. I'd rather take a few poses of backbending in the backbending family and take them for a shorter duration rather than one giant pose for 10, 15 breaths. It just feels good to get all of the ranges of motion in that backbending. When you're ready, come onto your back and lower all the way down. Feet flat on the floor, and yet another back bend here. So again, I'm just taking all these different back bends to see which one my body is going to respond to better today. Bridge pose is next. Separate your feet as far as you need. Turn your toes out. That'll help with the low back pain. It'll also help to get your shoulders to come a little closer under your body so you can press your entire spine up off the ground. Keep pressing your hips up to the ceiling and your chest over towards your chin, and press your thighs up to the ceiling. Line those inner thighs straight forward and energetically press your inner thighs towards the front of the mat. All right, and then release your hands to come down and lower down to your back. Lower down to your hips. Take a moment here to decide if this is the end of your backbending practice or if you want to add in one more. Urdhva Dhanurasana, upward bow. So I'm going to move back into the bridge shape, place my palms under, fingers under my shoulders, palms next to my ears. I'm going to come to my head, and then I'm going to reposition my hands. Now I've lifted my heels to move into upward bow. Then you can place them back down or leave them up. But your goal here is not to get closer to your feet. It's to open your heart and your chest more, okay? The goal is not to get your hands closer to your feet. I should have specified. All right, lower back down to the floor. And once you get back down out of that back bend, take those knees side to side. Easy little windshield wipers. Give yourself a gentle little squeeze. Hug your knees into your chest. And then let's come up to seated. Come over to hands and knees. Take a few moments here, if you want, tabletop, just to re-neutralize your spine, and then back into downward facing dog. Breath or two here again to reduce the back bending and neutralize the sensations from the back bending. Move into a hip opener next. You can take that right knee up to the top of your mat when you're ready for Ekapada Raj Kapotasana. Stretch your left leg back, lengthen it out behind you. Your left hip comes down directly behind your right heel. Point your right toes away from you. Think about rolling to the top of your right shin or rolling to the top of your right foot. Elbows come down to the floor, and with your elbows on the floor, imagine you can pull your chest through. So pull back on your elbows so your chest moves through your shoulders. And you can stay here as long as you'd like. When you're ready, you're going to come up and maybe test out a back bend here even. So this is a different kind of back bend. It's really a front hip stretch. When you're ready, swing that left leg forward. I'm going to move right into Agni Stambhasana. So I'm going to take the left shin in front of my right shin and just line up the two shins like fire logs. Agni Stambhasana is fire log pose. You can fold down to the floor if you'd like, or you can remain seated upright. Maybe use a couple blocks under your elbows or a chair seat to lean your head on if you'd like. Keep those ankles flexed, push out through the inner heels. And if you'd like to add on, take the left shin on top of the right shin. You might have to scoot your hips back a little bit to get the shins lined up. So you want, ideally, opposite knee to ankle here. And again, to avoid any inner knee pain, flex the foot through the inner foot moving out. So imagine pushing the inner line of your foot away from the inner knee. Focus on your breath here. When you're ready, you can come back up to seated. And swing your left leg back around into one leg king pigeon prep, working a step closer towards this posture with a back bend. If you can, fingertips to the floor, walk them in as close as you'd like to your hips, but lift from your back, lift from your front core. Nice little back bend just briefly there, then step back into downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Take a few moments here. Wiggle around. I like to twist side to side, so I just shift my hips off to the left and feel a nice, easy twist. That's the key word there. It's a minute twist. And hips to the right if you're doing that, both sides. All right, left knee comes through to the center, and we'll set up second side, Ekapada Raj Kapotasana. Stretch your right leg back, right hip behind your left heel, and again, point those left toes, rolling to the top of your left foot. And you can feel your left knee is not moving out wider than your left armpit. Elbows to the floor. Once again, imagine pulling your mat back, pulling your chest beyond your shoulder heads, and keep stretching back with your right toes. This pose, in its classical expression and interpretation, is a major back bend, and it requires that right leg to be super open, the left leg to be very strong. So not only do they need to be mobile, but they need to be very strong. So I want you to feel this activation in your thighs here as you walk your hands in and up, lift your chest, but feel your legs pressing the floor away. Now sweep your right leg around to the front of your mat so we can set up for Agni Stambhasana. I've lifted my left foot up away from the hip. Then when I take my right foot around, my heels are not close to my sit bones. They're far away, so it's two parallel shins. Remember to flex your ankles, and you can come down to your elbows here or rest your forehead on a chair seat or a stool or blocks. You can feel your hips have rotated and your sit bones are pointing back more than they're tucking under and pushing into the ground. So feel your sit bones start to stretch back energetically. Now, if you'd like, you can add that extra progression. You can take the right foot on top of the left ankle or the left knee, and you can start to stack your shins like fire logs. Remember, keep those ankles flexed. Push the inner line of your foot away from the ankle, the inner ankle. And again, take as long as you'd like here. If you want to stay here a few more moments, you're welcome to just sit and enjoy this pose, especially if you're feeling a great opening in your hips. But when you're ready, you can come back up to seated and start to swing that right leg back around behind, returning to Ekapada Raj Kapotasana prep. Now your left heel will pull back into that right hip. So you're going to pull the left heel back away from parallel. Stretch back with the right foot, power those legs up, fingertips towards the hips, fingers on the floor. Lift your chest, lift your chin, just briefly. And then step back, down dog. So these back bends are supposed to be energizing, not energy draining. So if you take them and you got to be in them for like 10 breaths, I mean, after you get done, it's going to feel like butt. It's not going to feel good. Do the things that feel good to your body. It doesn't matter how long you're in them. Once you're back in down dog, you can take your hips side to side again, that nice little moderate twist. and stretch. Just go for that big stretch. All right, I'm going to come back to seated. So take as long as you need here. If you need to come into tabletop and take child's pose for a moment, please do, and then catch up only when you're ready. All right, so when you come down to the floor, we're going to move into fish pose Matsyasana. So you might want a couple blocks if you've got those handy. Grab those. And we're going to move into Matsyasana fish. So you're going to keep your feet on the floor and your sit bones on the floor. My hands are behind me, and I'm going to lower down to my elbows first. You might stay here and then just start to lift your chin and open your heart. If the top of your head can come to the floor, that's great. Put it on the floor. You might have to scoot your elbows closer to your hips. If your head doesn't hit the floor, put a block under your head. And if that still is not okay, put a block under the middle of your upper back. I'm moving into bound angle with my knees and hands on my thighs. So I can feel that press into my hands, opens my chest and my collarbones. So my arms are not on the floor in this. Classical fish, you're in lotus and your fingers grab your big toes. So the arms are stretching out, not pushing the floor away. See how that causes my shoulders to jam up? It's gross. All right, so when you do want to come out of it though, put your elbows back on the floor and then lower back down, and just take a moment here to neutralize your spine and your neck. Draw your knees into your chest, give yourself a hug, Apanasana, and roll up to seated. We'll come into seated forward bends next. Right, so take your right ankle first and cross it over the top of your left thigh like a number 4. And then fold out over your left leg. You can stay here, or if this is comfortable and you feel like you could go deeper, you could pull that right heel up to your left hip bone. The right knee points straight forward though. And then you can fold out over your left leg again. And maybe you can turn to the right, open your ribs a little bit so your right hand can reach around and grab your right foot for a bind behind your back. If the bind is not happening, don't even worry about it. Maybe you want a belt or a sweat towel to create a connection to your foot and extension. Then lengthen out, chest over your toes. Let your sit bones once again rotate back towards the back end of your mat. On your inhale, come back up to seated, and then simply turn your right hip open. So you can keep the foot in half lotus and rebind, but the right knee is now opening out to the side. So think of this as a revolved Janu Shirshasana, that head of the knee pose. And if this is painful, you could definitely take your right foot down to the floor inside of your left foot. Reach out to your left heel with your left hand and open. So it's not necessarily how low can you get, it's how long can you get? How big of a stretch away from your hips can you get? Okay, inhale, return to facing forward. Uncross your right ankle. Take a moment in staff pose. When you're ready, set up the second side. Your left ankle crosses over the top of your right thigh for that number 4 shape, and start there. See if this is going to be the same for this side. Maybe it's going to be different. So you might need to then skip the add-on. Maybe you can pull your left heel up to your right hip. And if not, just enjoy the pose where you are. If you want to bind, your left hand comes around to the top of your left foot and then fold out over your right leg. We're not forcing the left knee down to the floor. It does not matter how low to the floor the left knee gets. In fact, instead, it should point forward. So we lift it if you need to get it to point forward. We will add into the revolved version. So turn the left hip open. Again, if your foot needs to come down to the floor, let it come down. If you can rebind or keep the bind in the transition, that's fine. If not, that's fine too. But keep your left hand, I wouldn't stretch it overhead for this one. Again, we don't really want to lean out over the leg. I want you to think about pulling your chest open and lining your torso over the right leg, like triangle pose. Right hand to your right heel. And open your left shoulder away from your right. Okay, release on your inhale. And come back into staff pose, Dandasana. Forward fold out over both legs, Paschimottanasana. Soften your back. Use a block on your shins or a pillow if you need to support the front of your body here. Press out again through those inner lines of your feet, just like you did in that hip opener, Agni Stambhasana. The inner big toe mounds and the inner heels press away from the inner ankles. And again, those sit bones stretch back towards the back end of your mat. All right, with your inhale, lift up. Okay, come over to hands and knees pose. So I'm going to show you a couple different options. I'm going to move into headstand. If you don't want to do headstand, take half Anahatasana, so it's half heart pose, with your left forearm pillowing your forehead and your right arm extending forward. Keep your hips over your knees, chest to the floor. And you would do that on both sides. So take like 3 to 5 breaths, left forearm and then the right forearm under your forehead. So that's one option to get an inversion in. Your heart is above your head here, and this is a great stretch for your shoulders. And this is a good prep for headstand. Okay, so the next option then, you could take dolphin pose without your head on the floor, down dog on your elbows, or you could move into headstand, head on the floor behind your open palms with your fingers interlaced. And then you can take one foot to heel to butt, bend the knees, or widen out your legs and lift up with a wide leg and stay half folded. That's a really easy transition. And then if you can, both legs together, straight up, press up, Shirshasana. Press your feet up to the ceiling. Press down into your elbows and press into the top of your head. So use your neck muscles to push the floor away with your head. Your legs are strong and they're active, but there should be work all around. So try not to focus just your shoulders or just your elbows or just your core or just your legs working. Try to focus on the entire body working together to lift the weight up off your head. And if you're taking the stretch on your forearms, switch your forearms out, make sure you're getting both sides equally. And then maybe you want to do both arms stretched above head in Anahatasana if you're skipping headstand. Just like any other pose, only stay here as long as you need or as long as you even want. There's no time you need to be here to prove anything. It's going to work for a second as well as it works for 10 seconds. In fact, sometimes if you stay longer, it doesn't work anymore. It feels awful. When you're ready, come down to child's pose and ground. Reset. As long as you need here, please stay in child's pose. But when you're ready, you can come up to seated. Take a moment in Vajrasana, just sitting on your heels, letting your body return to an upright position. Give it a time, give it a moment, some time to acclimate to that. And come onto your back, lie down, and we'll set up for plow pose. I'm going to take a shoulder stand practice here. So if you're preferring to take blocks under your hips, please stack a couple blocks up under your hips or use a chair seat for your feet and a modified shoulder stand. For plow pose, toes overhead to the floor, interlace your hands behind your back and try to snuggle your shoulders closer together. So just like bridge pose, you're trying to get that spine to come up off the floor. And so you're standing on your shoulders. If your feet don't quite hit the floor, you can use your hands on your back to support or put a chair seat at your head so that your feet can rest on a chair seat. Then lift your legs from your glutes and do place your hands on your back at this point so you can take your weight into your elbows for shoulder stand. Just like headstand, you're pushing the mat away with your shoulders and your elbows, not like headstand though, no neck or head push, okay? And then lift your feet, use your legs to help lift the weight, but also use your wrists. Put some weight into your hands here. So let your feet move back away from your face. And again, just like any other pose, only stay there as long as you can breathe and focus. And then when you're done, roll out of it and come all the way up to seated. We're going to take a twist to recover from shoulder stand. Cross your right foot over the other side of your left leg. If you can bind, I love this as a counter pose to shoulder stand because it stretches the shoulders out and it opens the neck. So if you can bind, wrap your left arm around the outside of your right thigh, and then your right hand can come around to catch your left hand. And then I look forward over my left foot. That really helps to open up the neck area that was just working and the shoulders that were just working really hard in shoulder stand. Just a few breaths on each side. Release when you're ready. And then switch sides. Left foot's going to come over the right. Right arm's going to come around the outside of the left thigh and wrap that right hand through. Left arm around to catch the right hand. And then look over your left shoulder if you'd like. Maybe do both. And again, if it feels better, look over the right shoulder. So you can look either way here. I just prefer to look over the front. I feel like when I look over the front, my right shoulder lifts. Yep, there I go. So I just shifted back. I was leaning forward way too much in that. So notice, maybe you take a few moments with each option, looking over the left and look over the right. Flex out through that right foot, press forward, so that when you release your bind, you come back to Dandasana without wobbling around and hurting your back. Cross your ankles here just for a moment. Sit. Let your hands rest on your knees. Let your head balance over your shoulders and shoulders over your hips. Notice your breath. Notice your body and the hard work it just did. And then bow to your practice here. Bow to you. Tell yourself thank you. Tell yourself good job. So that when you come into your Shavasana, into your restorative posture, you can just land there and stay there as long as you want and end your practice when you're ready. So take these next few minutes just for you. Find any pose that feels good, but just let yourself rest, relax, and feel your body. And at any point in time, put your hand on your belly, hand on your heart, and feel underneath your hands your power, your courage, your strength, and always practice appreciation and love for those things that you possess. Thanks, yogis.